I had been looking forward to Christmas for weeks, excited to finally spend a stress-free holiday with my family. Unlike previous years, I had everything planned well in advance. Gifts were wrapped, travel arrangements were made, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt good about the holidays. I had carefully picked out presents for my parents, my brother Ethan, his wife Laura, and their kids. Just in case, I had even bought a few extra gifts in case unexpected guests showed up. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong. That's why, when I arrived at my parents' house with arms full of presents and saw my mother standing at the door with a hesitant expression, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "We don't want you here this year," she said. At first, I thought she was joking. I even let out a nervous laugh, expecting her to break into a smile and invite me inside. But before she could say anything else, Ethan's voice cut through the cold air from behind her. "This is no place for losers. You're really starting to wear on all of us." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I stared at them, my mother's face tight with discomfort, my father standing further inside, avoiding eye contact. And Ethan, standing with his arms crossed, looking completely unbothered. For a moment, a mix of emotions surged through me: confusion, anger, humiliation. But I forced myself to stay calm. "All right," I said simply, nodding. Then I turned and walked back to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the gifts piled in the passenger seat, his words echoed in my mind. No place for losers? I was wearing on them. Where had this even come from? I had always been there for Ethan and his family. I had covered the cost of summer camps for his kids, paid for school supplies, and even helped him with mortgage payments when he was struggling. And now, suddenly, I wasn't good enough to be at Christmas. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to leave without getting answers. I got out of the car, left the gifts behind, and marched back to the house. My parents were still standing there, whispering to each other, while Ethan lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. I didn't knock. I walked straight in. "What's going on?" I demanded. "Why am I not welcome at Christmas? What did I do?" Ethan didn't even look up from his phone as he smirked. "You really don't get it, do you? You've been slacking off. The kids barely got anything from you this year." I blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about? I've spent hundreds on presents for them. More than anyone else." Ethan finally looked up, his smirk widening. "Last year, you did more. This year, it's like you don't care. Honestly? It's embarrassing." I turned to my parents, expecting them to say something, to defend me, to tell Ethan he was out of line. Instead, my mother offered a weak smile and said, "But you just bought a new car. You had money for that." I stared at her, barely able to believe what I was hearing. "The car is on credit," I said evenly. "And even if it wasn't, how does buying a car make me responsible for Ethan's kids? They're not my responsibility." Ethan leaned back on the couch, stretching his arms behind his head. "You're the one who makes the most money. Families help each other. You've always done that." I glanced at Laura, who sat quietly in the corner, her face flushed. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "So let me get this straight," I said. "Because I've helped in the past, I'm obligated to do it forever? And if I don't, I'm a loser?" Ethan shrugged. "If the shoe fits." That was it. That was all I needed to hear. I exhaled slowly and turned toward my parents. "You know what? You're right. I don't belong here." Then I turned back to Ethan. "Enjoy your Christmas. And good luck with those presents, because this loser is done financing your life." Without another word, I walked out. The drive home was quiet. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my mind racing. I had spent years bending over backward for my brother, making sure his family never struggled the way I had growing up. And now I was disposable. Now I was a loser. By the time I got home, I felt sick looking at the unopened presents still sitting in my car. I had put so much thought into them, making sure each one was perfect for the kids, for my parents, even for Ethan and Laura, and for what? I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. And then it hit me, this wasn't just about Christmas. This had been building for years. Ethan had always relied on me. When he and Laura first got married, money was tight. He struggled to keep a steady job, and Laura's part-time work barely covered their expenses. So I helped. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. When they were on the verge of eviction, I covered their rent. When their second child was born, I helped with childcare costs. At first, I thought it was temporary. But temporary became permanent. Every time Ethan was in trouble, I was the first person he called. And I always said yes, because I cared about his kids, because I didn't want them to suffer for his mistakes. But somewhere along the way, my generosity had turned into expectation. I wasn't a helpful older sibling anymore, I was an ATM. And tonight? Being told I wasn't even welcome for Christmas because I hadn't done enough was the final straw. When I woke up the next morning, everything was cleared. I was done. No more covering for Ethan's financial failures. No more stepping in when he messed up. If he wanted his kids to have what I had planned for them, that was on him. I knew this wouldn't just mean cutting him off financially. It meant risking my relationship with my parents, with his kids, even with Laura, but I wasn't going to let them treat me like a walking wallet anymore. So I waited. I didn't call them. I didn't reach out, and at first, I thought maybe they had gotten the message. But Ethan? Ethan wasn't the kind of person to let things go that easily. New Year's came and went in silence. No texts. No phone calls. I spent the holidays alone for the first time in years. I told myself I didn't care, that it didn't matter. But when midnight struck and my phone stayed silent, I felt an ache I hadn't expected. For a brief moment, I even considered calling them, but then I remembered Ethan's smug face, his words, "No place for losers." I had been the one holding our family together, the one making sure his kids had everything they needed, and yet I was the disposable one? No, if this was what they wanted, I would give them their distance. By mid-January, something shifted. Laura had always been quiet, never the type to start an argument. But out of nowhere, she sent me a text one evening. "Laura, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't agree with what happened. I don't want Ethan to know I said anything, but you should know." I stared at my phone for a long time, unsure how to respond. On one hand, it felt good to know that someone in the family understood. On the other, where was this energy when Ethan was kicking me out of Christmas? Eventually, I replied. "Me, thanks, Laura. But this isn't something I can just move on from." She didn't respond, and I didn't push. A few weeks passed. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan showed up at my house. I was in the middle of a work call when I heard the knocking. At first, I ignored it, figuring it was a delivery. But it kept going. When I finally opened the door, Ethan stood there, looking worse than I had ever seen him. His clothes were wrinkled, his face tired, and his usual arrogance was replaced with something desperate. Before I could say anything, he pushed past me into the house. "We need to talk," he said. I folded my arms. "About what?" He exhaled sharply. "You need to stop this nonsense and start helping again." I let out a laugh, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he actually thought this approach would work. "Helping?" I repeated. "You mean paying your bills?" "I told you, I'm done." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're the one with money. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for us since you decided to be selfish?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Selfish? The kids barely have what they need. Laura's doing her best, but we can't do this alone. You used to care about us." I felt my anger rise. "Are you listening to yourself? You're a grown man, Ethan. You have a wife. You have kids. If you need money, go earn it. It's not my job to fix your life." His eyes flashed with something: anger, frustration, maybe even shame. "You've always helped before." "And that was my mistake," I shot back. "I let you believe that my kindness was an obligation. That ends now." He scoffed. "Unbelievable. So you're just going to abandon us?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You lied to Mom and Dad about me. You turned them against me. You kicked me out of Christmas because I didn't spend enough on your kids. And now you're here demanding more? You have some nerve, Ethan." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "We're done here," I said firmly. "I'm not giving you another dime. And I don't want to hear from you again until you figure out how to be an adult." For a long moment, he just stood there, fists clenched, breathing heavily. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to pick up. Hello? A smooth, professional voice responded. Is this Nathan? Yeah. Who's this? My name is Mark Dawson. I'm a lawyer. I represent a client who has concerns regarding certain financial matters involving your family. I went cold. What financial matters? Mark hesitated. I can't discuss details over the phone, but it concerns financial contributions you've made to your brother, Ethan, over the years. Specifically, how those funds were used. 100 thoughts raced through my head, none of them good. Who's your client? I'm afraid I can't disclose that just yet, Mark said smoothly. But I assure you, this is not a lawsuit against you. It's more of an investigation. Would you be willing to meet to discuss it further? I hesitated. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea. But curiosity won out. Fine, I said. I'll come in. The next day, I sat in Mark Dawson's office, heart pounding as he slid a folder across the desk. Your sister-in-law, Laura, is my client, he said. I blinked. Laura? Mark nodded. She has reason to believe Ethan has been misusing the money you've given him. Hiding it from her. Possibly even from you. My stomach twisted. Hiding it how? Mark opened the folder, revealing bank statements, receipts, and even screenshots of messages. She recently discovered that Ethan has a secret account. He's been funneling money into it, money that was supposed to go toward his family. Based on the evidence, a significant portion has been spent on gambling, luxury items, and other personal expenses. I stared at the documents. Transactions from my account to his. Withdrawals. Large transfers to a secondary account, expensive restaurants. Online casinos. Even a few hotel stays. My hands tightened into fists. You're telling me, all the times I paid for his bills, his kids' school stuff, that money never went to them? Mark nodded grimly. It appears that way. I felt sick. Laura had only discovered the second account recently. She had suspected something was wrong for a while but never had proof until Ethan got careless and left bank statements out. That's when she contacted Mark. What does she want to do? I asked finally. She's weighing her options, Mark said. Right now, she just wants to protect herself and the kids. If Ethan's behavior escalates, she may file for separation. That hit me harder than I expected. Laura had always been loyal, always quiet, always standing by Ethan's side. If even she was ready to leave, things were worse than I had realized. I left the lawyer's office with a storm of emotions and anger. Betrayal. Guilt for not seeing it sooner, but above all, for the first time in years, I felt free. Ethan could no longer manipulate me. I was done being his safety net. I couldn't shake the weight of everything I had just learned. The gambling. The hidden money. The fact that Laura was quietly preparing to leave. It felt like I had been living in a completely different reality from the one Ethan had created for himself. I kept my distance over the next few days. I didn't call my parents, and I definitely didn't reach out to Ethan. But, apparently, silence wasn't something he could handle. One evening, just as I was sitting down for dinner, my phone rang. Ethan. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me told me to pick up. What do you want? I said flatly. His voice was tense, almost desperate. We need to talk. I smirked. That's what you said last time. Didn't go too well for you, did it? He ignored my jab. You said something to Laura, didn't you? I raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, he snapped. She's been acting weird since Christmas. Now she's talking about lawyers and separation. I know you've been putting ideas in her head. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You think I'm the problem? I said. You're the one who lied to her. You're the one who hid money. You're the one who gambled away what was supposed to be for your kids. If she's finally tired of your crap, that's on you. Not me. There was silence on the other end. Then, in a low, dangerous voice, Ethan said, You don't know what you're talking about. I felt my anger rise. Oh, I think I do. I gritted my teeth, gripping the phone tighter. Kelly told me everything, the secret account, the gambling, the money you wasted while I was out here breaking my back to help you. You want to talk about losers, Ethan? You're the biggest one I know. I could hear his breathing getting heavier, like he was about to explode. So I cut him off before he could start. You've used me for the last time, I said coldly. I'm done covering for you. If Laura leaves you, that's on you. And if you ever try to drag me into your mess again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been up to. Before he could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, I felt in control. The next day, I got a call from Laura. Did Ethan call you? She asked hesitantly. Yeah, I said. He wasn't happy. She sighed. I confronted him about the gambling and the secret account. He admitted to some of it, but he's still trying to downplay it. Are you okay? I asked. A pause. Then, quietly, she said, I think I'm just done. Those words hit harder than I expected. I kept making excuses for him, she continued. I told myself things would get better. That the kids needed stability. But they deserve better than this. Better than him. I had always known things were bad, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. This wasn't just a bad fight. This was the beginning of the end. Whatever you decide to do, I told her, I'm here for you. Thank you, she whispered. Then, after a long pause, she added, and I'm sorry. The way we treated you at Christmas wasn't fair. I should have spoken up. We talked for a while, and by the time we hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. Ethan had destroyed my relationship with him, but Laura and the kids? They weren't my enemies. And if she was finally standing up for herself, I wasn't going to hold a grudge. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't done causing problems. A few weeks later, I got a short text from Laura. We're leaving today. I called her immediately. What do you mean you're leaving? I can't stay anymore, she said softly. I can't keep pretending this is normal. I swallowed. What about the rent? The bills? How are you going to manage everything? She hesitated. I was hoping you could help me. Just for a little while. As much as I hate to ask, I didn't even let her finish. Say no more, I said. I'll take care of it. So, yeah. I ended up helping her and the kids. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing the right thing, like I was actually helping someone who deserved it, not being used. When Ethan came home and found the house empty, he lost his mind. He called me in a rage, screaming about how I had ruined his life, how I had turned Laura against him. I let him rant for a while, then calmly said, maybe this wouldn't have happened if you spent more time being a husband and father and less time gambling. Then I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. Laura and the kids are doing well now. They've settled into a new home in another state, the kids are adjusting to their new school, and Laura finally has a stable job. As for Ethan? Last I heard, he's still blaming everyone but himself. But honestly, that's not my problem anymore.